Unit 731, Secret Biological Laboratory. Established in 1936 under the leadership of Dr. Shiro Ishii, officially named the Water Purification Department No. 731, but in reality it was a center for developing biological and chemical weapons. Located in a fortress near Harbin, China, the monstrous experiments claimed 200,000 to 300,000 victims, mostly Chinese civilians. People were infected with plague, syphilis, cholera, tuberculosis, typhoid, and other diseases. Patients were vivisected without anesthesia to observe infection progression. Men, women, and children were used to test vaccines, infections, and other medical experiments. Bombs containing plague-carrying fleas were dropped on cities and villages. Experiments involved contaminating water, food, and air with chemical agents. Victims were frozen, burned with flamethrowers, exposed to radiation, or dissected alive. Women were raped to study venereal disease transmission through sexual contact. Forced abortions and body part transplants, for example, sewing legs onto arms, were conducted. All these atrocities were led by Dr. Shiro Ishii, if he could even be called a doctor. Subsequently, he and his colleagues received immunity from the US in exchange for their research data. After the war, they were not prosecuted and held Unit 731 veteran reunions in Japan. The USSR arrested some participants, but many received relatively light sentences and were later released. The approach of the Japanese military in China resembled Nazi actions in Europe, ideologies of racial superiority and inhumane experiments on inferior peoples. Thus, Shiro Ishii is considered the Japanese equivalent of Dr. Mengele from Auschwitz. Japan's victory over Russia in 1905 was a sensation and boosted national pride. The Japanese viewed themselves as racially and culturally superior to the Chinese, which underpinned their aggression and cruelty. After World War I, Japan felt unrecognized by the West, fueling the rise of militarism and nationalism. Many horrors of Unit 731 were long concealed or ignored, especially in the West. After the war, the US prioritized scientific data over justice for the victims. Fact 1. Hello, Hell on Earth. Meet Unit 731, Japan's scientific genocide with a view of Harbin. If you still think science is all about noble lab coats and saving humanity, welcome to one of the most sinister corners of human ingenuity, Unit 731. Officially, it had a cute name, Water Purification Unit. Sure, as if they were busy making filters for drinking water. Except the only thing you'd be drinking was blood. In reality, this was a meticulously planned, impeccably organized factory of horror where people weren't just killed. They were opened up like tin cans while still alive. Because you see, corpses would compromise the scientific purity of the experiment. Sorry, Dr. Mengele, but Japan had your match. Dr. Shiro Ishii, a man who looked at biological weapons like morning coffee, invigorating and fueling a thirst for power. Unit 731 wasn't a camp. It was a slaughterhouse disguised as medicine, hidden behind fortress walls near Harbin. By the most conservative estimates, 200,000 to 300,000 people, Chinese, Koreans, Russians, were turned into living raw material for its deranged laboratory. No one was spared. This wasn't a concentration camp. It was a 9-year-long scientific experiment spanning the breadth of absolute madness. But of course, you've probably never heard of it, because victors don't just write history, they also grant immunity to butchers if they promise to share their lab notes. Welcome to reality.
Fact 2. Dr. Ishii, executioner with a diploma, surgery without anesthesia, and lunch on schedule. What happens when a maniac gets a medical license, a military rank, and a blank check from the state? You get a monster like Shiro Ishii, a doctor in the sense of, I'll dig into your liver while you scream in pain. He wasn't a physician, he was a butcher in a lab coat who decided the best cure for boredom was experimenting on living people. What did he do? Oh, just the cutting edge of scientific progress. Got a syphilis patient? Why treat them when you can gut them alive and see how the disease eats their insides? Fascinating, right? Healthy subject? No problem. Inject them with plague, cholera, and a dash of dysentery, because triple cocktails are fun. Ishii, like a true evil genius, wanted to study infection in real time, which meant no anesthesia while they sliced open your stomach. Why? Because, as he said, decomposition interferes with accuracy. Smell the stench of insanity? That's not bad breath. It's the official stance of Japanese military medicine in the 1930s. This Harbin Frankenstein documented everything meticulously, scientifically. After all, it's crucial to know how many minutes a person screams when you swap their legs for arms. Yes, this isn't fiction. It's not a horror movie. These were real Japanese scientific experiments. And here's the kicker. No one was held accountable. But don't worry, he didn't get the gallows. He got a pension. Because apparently, if you carve people up cleverly enough, you can become useful to America.
Fact 3. Unit 731. When war is just a cover for a bacterial apocalypse. If you still think the worst thing that can fall from the sky is a bomb, dear reader, you clearly haven't lived under the wings of a Japanese plane in the 1930s, because sometimes it wasn't shells raining down, it was fleas, with the plague, for real. This isn't a figure of speech. Japanese planes scattered fleas infected with the bubonic plague, as if throwing a death party. Then they watched who dies and how quickly. Scientific curiosity, you know. Thousands of Chinese perished in agony while Dr. Ishii sat in his lab jotting notes, probably in elegant Japanese calligraphy, because even the apocalypse had to be aesthetic. And that's not all. Children were fed poisoned food so they could be cut open later to see how the toxins spread through their organs. People were infected with dysentery, cholera, syphilis, like they were testing the menu for a new hell-to-go restaurant. Villages saw figures in hazmat suits, not to help, but to record how fast and efficiently the population died. There was even a scientific method to it: mortality per square meter, mortality per hour, mortality by age, all for the reports. Think this was the work of some deranged loners? Nope, this was an officially funded state enterprise where murder wasn't a crime, it was a research method. And when the war ended, all the data was neatly packed up and handed to the Americans, along with the scientists. Instead of a tribunal, a contract. Instead of the gallows, a medical career. So, the next time you hear biological research, think of Harbin, 1939. And trust me, bacteria were just the beginning.
Fact 4. Immunity for genocide. How Dr. Death became an ally of democracy. So, you're probably thinking, okay, Ishii was a sadist, but surely they hanged him like dear old Himmler. How naive. You're clearly underestimating how flexible moral standards can get when biological research is at stake. When World War II crumbled to dust, some innocently believed all the butchers would be locked up. Wrong, my dear friends. Shiro Ishii, architect of history's grandest biological graveyard, didn't just avoid prison, he never even saw a courtroom. Why? Because someone in the Pentagon suddenly realized, maybe those plague experiments and no anesthesia dissections could be useful. And just like that, with a snap, the maniac doctor became a valuable scientific asset. His blood-soaked dossiers turned into data of strategic interest, and he himself, an esteemed consultant. Ishii dodged the gallows, the cell, even a slap on the wrist. He simply retired with honors in Japan, died in his bed in pajamas, not in shackles or a cage, but with a cup of tea in hand. Charming, right? Here's the cherry on top. His colleagues held reunions, cozy veteran get-togethers, as if they were med school alumni, not a gang of dissectors. What did we learn? If you're cruel enough, but useful enough, you won't be punished. You'll be hired. Welcome to a world where science trumps morality and mass murder is just extreme data collection in field conditions.
Fact 5. A gathering of butchers. How former Unit 731 members threw parties with champagne and memories. You thought these people would at least lie low after the war, flee to the middle of nowhere, be haunted by nightmares? Sure, they were haunted, all right, by the dilemma of whether to pair oysters or caviar with their sake. These charming doctors, who you now hopefully associate with the sound of retching, calmly returned to Japan in the 1950s. And what did they do? They started holding reunions. Yes, actual Unit 731 veteran reunions. As if they hadn't been torching people with flamethrowers, but were just interns at a dental clinic. They gathered, hugged, and swapped stories from their glory days. Remember when we put a woman's intestines in her chest and watched her suffocate? Oh yeah, and how you stitched that guy up so nicely, arms for legs, remember? Ha ha ha, you butcher! This isn't hyperbole. These people lived openly, holding high positions in universities, health ministries, and pharmaceutical companies. One became a respected professor, another a corporate consultant. They weren't just unpunished, they were seen as professionals. They didn't hide. They weren't ashamed. They were just uncomfortable. And the big question, why didn't you hear about this in school, movies, or popular books? Because losers get judged, but the useful get hidden in the shadows. Unit 731 became taboo because the West traded silence for knowledge. Here's your history lesson, kids. Not all monsters hide under the bed. Some give university lectures and collect state pensions.
Fact 6. Soviets, trials, and a circus of leniency. How Unit 731's butchers escaped justice even with the Russians. You might be thinking, okay, America sold out for bioweapons data, but surely the Soviet Union, that great champion against fascism, gave those scumbags what they deserved. Oh, dear reader, how wrong you are. The script is the same: shock, arrests, and a soft pat instead of an iron fist. When the Red Army stormed Manchuria in 1945, they did nab some Unit 731 members. They even held a semblance of a trial in Khabarovsk. There were testimonies, numbers, confessions, chills down the spine, everything you'd expect. And then, sentences of 10, 15, maybe 25 years max. Not a single death penalty. No firing squad. Nothing. This wasn't Nuremberg. It was a bureaucratic appetizer. And it gets better. In the 1950s, many were released and sent back to Japan as if they'd just forgotten their keys on a train. Why? Because the USSR suddenly developed tender geopolitical feelings for Japan. Let's be friends, they said. So they repatriated the specialists with a wink and a nudge. We can look the other way too if needed. The moral? Even if you dismembered children for science, there's always a government ready to say, well, stuff happens. Just don't forget to smile for the veterans group photo. History? Nah, it's an absurd comedy set in a concentration camp.
Fact 7. Dr. Death gets a pension. How the U.S. traded justice for notes from hell. So, you thought it was over. No trials, murderers walking free. Surely historians could at least expose the truth? Think again. Because here, ladies and gentlemen, begins the most cynical betrayal of the 20th century. When America got hold of Shiro Ishii, the mastermind of the slaughterhouse called Unit 731, everything was set. Interrogations, evidence, victims, witnesses, notebooks full of horrors. And what did the U.S. do? They shrugged, handed out immunity from prosecution, and said, this could be useful. You've heard that right. The American military fully whitewashed this living fascist because his research was too interesting. They wanted to know how fast plague spreads in a village, how long a person survives with their insides turned out, how frost affects a child's bones. For that, they forgave everything. Everything. Shiro Ishii died in 1959, in his bed, peacefully, well-fed, without trial. He didn't hide. He didn't even change his name. His colleagues went back to universities, pharmaceutical companies, ministries. Some even got state awards. And America? They got folders full of mass torture data. This isn't just forgetting. It's collusion. A deal where the victims number in the millions and the winner is sadism under a microscope. And if you think this was long ago and far away, think again. Because if truth can be sold once, it can be sold again.
Fact 8. Reincarnation of executioners. How Unit 731 held alumni reunions, and no one batted an eye. What do you imagine happens to people who vivisected children, infected cities with plague, and wrote reports on the effectiveness of rape as a form of biological warfare? At the very least, life imprisonment. At most, the gallows. Well, brace yourself. In post-war Japan, Unit 731 members lived freely, worked, and, hold on, through friendly reunions. Yes, regular veteran gatherings of the unit, with buffets, sake glasses, and probably nostalgic anecdotes like, remember testing syphilis on school kids? Oh, golden times, Hayashi-san. And no one stopped them. No one condemned them. Not Japanese society, not the government, not the allies of democracy. These people worked as doctors, scientists, officials, not in some underground lair, but in universities and hospitals. Some even wrote memoirs. No remorse, no shame. This isn't just escaping justice. It's an official return to the spotlight with a welcome mat and a red carpet. Imagine SS officers post-war throwing parties under the slogan, Golden Death 1943. We remember, we love, we dissect. That's what happens when truth is buried, culprits are shielded, and science gets a green light in exchange for blood. And if you think this could never happen again, check your textbooks. Unit 731 gets a couple of lines, but Japan's great scientific progress in the 20th century, an entire chapter. The lesson is simple. If you're a war criminal, just wait until someone finds your notes useful. Then, pop open the buffet.
Why isn't this in school textbooks? Because the victors made a deal. The US buried the data in Pentagon safes. The USSR traded justice for political leverage. Japan hid behind amnesia. Unit 731 is an inconvenient truth, wiped clean like blood from a lab table. 300,000 lives. The price? Silent archives and a cozy retirement for the executioners. Remember Harbin. Remember the numbers. Remember the logs. Chinese, Koreans, Russians whose screams became scientific data. their names erased, their pain locked in classified folders. Ask, why did the butchers walk free? Where's the line for benefit to humanity? Don't let progress become an alibi for a new hell. Ask yourself, can you trust your doctor, your scientist, your ruler? Or will their higher purpose justify your fate as a log? Unit 731 isn't history. It's a diagnosis of humanity. This nightmare is just one episode. On this channel, we tear through the veil of lies every week. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Vatican secrets, forgotten genocides, hundreds of shocking facts textbooks ignore. Want the truth? Subscribe, hit the bell. A new dive into the abyss of history is coming soon. Don't miss it.